Good morning, everyone. Today we have with us Shiv Kunal Verma. Shiv Kunal Verma is quite well known as the author of the book 1962, The War That Wasn't. The book received quite a few accolades and has become the go-to book in terms of reading about the 1962 India-China conflict. But we are not going to talk about the book today because today Kunal is here with us to speak about his 1992 documentary on the Indian Air Force called Salt of the Earth. For those who weren't aware of it, in 1992, when this documentary was released, it was a groundbreaking uh, film that was made about the Indian Air Force that incorporated snippets about its history, air-to-air visual shots, and much more. So let's welcome Kunal, and we'll start discussing about the film.
Thanks, Sagan. It's always a pleasure to be with you. It's very nice to be there.
Yeah. So Kunal, to set the stage, I remember, you know, I grew up in the 80s looking at Doordarshan documentaries and films. There was no internet. There were no books. The only source of let me say information for aviation nerds like me was to sit up and watch Doordarshan on 8th October of every year, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever documentary they made. And usually we would see these documentaries, a team will visit one airbase, they will show aircraft taking off, landing, music ripped off from various other albums. Then one fine day and as we know now, 1992, I cannot remember it at that time, but I remember watching this documentary. And right from the opening shot, I was like totally engrossed. I mean, I kept saying to myself, is that a MiG 25 taking off? I've never seen one. I never seen one so up and close. And that was quite a ride for the next 1 hour. And I'm hoping that we will take the opportunity to sort of review it scene by scene and get some of your inputs. But before we go there, tell me about the background. I mean, how did you end up making this? How did you end up starting on this filmmaking journey?
Well, it was badly needed. I mean, the point that you're making that nobody, there was nothing absolutely. In fact, there was some film division documentaries and stuff like that. I had got into filmmaking with Bittu Sehgal on Project Tiger. I'd shot that series, and then with Diti Bhalla, we later got married and we set up this company. The whole idea was to make films for not just the Air Force but the Army, Air Force, and the Navy. So we worked out a series of scripts which were on India's fighting man. And then we also, the third person who was working with us at that time very closely was General Adi Setna, who was the former vice chief of the army. And he had been the commandant in staff college, and my father was an instructor. And we were both from the Doon school. And, we were a wonderful guy. So we worked out the first three pilot scripts. And I remember one of them, and the cutoff point was independence. We did not want to go beyond that. So it's episode one actually started with the division of one Punjab, between India and Pakistan and all that kind of stuff. But these were scripts, and once these scripts were being floated around, the vice chief of the Air Force that time was Air Marshal Nimi Suri. So he asked us to drop in at his office, and he said that, look, I'm going to be the chief next. He knew that. And he said that, look, you'll never get the Army and the Navy and the Air Force on the same table. So let me do what the Air Force does best, jump the queue, and why don't you shoot for us? So I said, why not? And so we worked out a script. We started working on Salt of the Earth. The name Salt of the Earth, I remember General Rodriguez was the Army chief, and he called me and he said, that's our title. We are Salt of the Earth. It's okay. And he said, what does the Air Force have to do with Salt of the Earth? But anyway, all that was later. And then we had to raise the money because Nimi had said very categorically that I'll give you everything that I can give you in terms of support, aircraft, this, that, and the other. But don't ask me for any money. We needed a lot of money because we were going to shoot this on 16 mm, Video was in its infancy. We were It was not going to be an easy film to make. So, uh, the normal thing would be that you would write to half a dozen people and try and raise the money. But I had a lot of self-belief, and I just wrote that one letter, which was to I addressed it to Air Commodore, Honorary Air Commodore J.R.D. Tata, and sent it off. And I wasn't going to write to anybody else. I mean, I was very clear that he will not say no. Now suddenly we get this, after 2 weeks or so, we get this letter saying that this message saying that come to Bombay House, and so Dipti and I scrambled from wherever we were. I think we were in Lakshadweep, if I'm not mistaken. We were shooting a film there, and we were on underwater and all that. And then we came, we got there, and General Setna flew in from Delhi. And I remember communicating with him, and I told him, I said, sir, at the Delhi airport, see if you can pick up JRD's autobiography, or biography by Lala called Beyond the Blue Mountain. It's a great opportunity. We'll get him to sign it and all that. So anyway, General Setna came from Delhi. Dipti and I don't remember where we were, but we sort of walked into this meeting, which was JRD and Ratan Tata and General Setna, Dipti, and myself. And first thing JRD said was, I think, there is one rank higher than Air Commodore. He was, so I said, oh, he said, I'm actually an Air Vice Marshal with the Air Force. And it was delightful. I mean, he was just so wonderful. And straight away, I had asked for 21 lakhs at that time. It's a lot of money, and he said, Kunal, I'm giving you the money. That's not a problem. And then we all sat around and we got these silver trays with tea on it. In Bombay House, they used to give you these individual sets. And I remember Ratan Tata sitting on my left. JRD was in the main sofa, and then Dipti and General Setna was sitting opposite. There was Ratan Tata dipping his glucose biscuits and having them, and it was like, and suddenly he turned around to me and he said, how do you plan to handle 62? And I said, sir, we'll show it as it was. I mean, we're doing the history of the Air Force. And basically, the Air Force having ducked the issue in 62 was a contentious kind of a thing. At that time, there was a lot of things we didn't know. We got to know them while the research was going on. And I said, so we have to talk about it. So he said, no, and JRD also said, it has to be a feel-good film. But I said, if we're doing a historical film, I mean, we can't pick and choose. I mean, we have to show it what's and all. I mean, where we failed, where we got hammered, let's say so. So it became an argument, Now, the funny thing is, you don't go into a meeting asking somebody for money and then start arguing with him. I mean, and I wanted to get out of this argument. And General Setna, I could see, was beginning to feel that there goes our 21 lakhs. And JRD was watching this argument between Ratan Tata and me develop. And I didn't want to actually get into this argument, but I couldn't back out either. And General Setna had this look on his face. Yeah, pani dal diya, as they say, good old Parsi style. So he then finally butted in and said, don't. I'll talk to Kunal and all that, but don't mind him. He says to JRD, he gets very emotional about 62 because his father's battalion was involved in the in Namkachu. He said this, and the reaction. I was looking at JRD, and his head snapped up like that, and without batting an eyelid, he said, "Which battalion?" "2 Rajput," he asked me. He didn't say 2nd Rajput. He said 2 Rajput. And I looked at this gentleman. He was 92. It was just a year before he died. And at that time in 90, now a lot of people know about these things, but at that time nobody knew anything. And then he looked at me and he said, 281 men died. And it was like, that was a moment. And anyway, that was the end of the argument as far as Ratan Tata also got back to his glucose biscuits, and so that was that. And then JRD said two things to Dipti and me. He said, make a film which makes the Air Force feel good. It's feel tall. They must believe in themselves. I said, sir, whatever little I've seen of the Air Force, I don't think that's going to be much of a problem, because there's so much of drama and there's so much. Even a MiG-21 taking off is like fantastic. We don't need to have dancing people around it. It's just show it for what it's worth. And then, so we all shook hands and stuff. And then General Satan had only managed to pick up one copy of Beyond the Blue Mountain. So, but since I'd asked for it, he gave it to me. And so I asked JRD, I said, so will you sign this for me? So JRD looked at it and said, no, this is rubbish. And he put it aside. And he called his secretary, which Britannia wala, something like that. And she came and she said, वो हमारा वो जो Beyond वो aircraft and engine perfect वाला किताब लेके आओ. I want to sign that for these two. So she said, typical. I mean, you can imagine the atmosphere in this in Bombay. She's a secretary. She wags his finger at him and said, "एक ही copy बचा है." So how can you give it away? Like, so he said, "नहीं नहीं लेके आओ," and all that. So they had a little bit of an exchange. She brought it. It's called Aircraft and Engine Perfect. And then he started signing it, and he got Dipti's name a little mixed up, and he kept calling her Dipsy, Dipsy instead of Ti. So she tried to correct him once, but then the hell with it. And from Dipsy, he went to the Deep Sea or whatever he went to, and he stopped writing, and he had this mischievous look on his face, and he says, this book actually starts with that famous air race from London to Karachi, where he gave his spark plugs to engineer won the race and then went on to join the Air Force. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened. And there was another gentleman in that race called Mohinder Singh, who his navigation skills were terrible. He used to every time take off in his biplane and leopard moth or tiger moth, and he would be recovered from various fields. And very patriotically, he named his aircraft Miss India. And the British press turned around and said, given his navigational record, he probably missed it altogether. Tatas were absolutely fantastic. I mean, there was no interference from them. There was no interference from the Air Force. There was nothing. I mean, I was given an absolute free hand to do what I wanted.
Did they get to read or review the script or your plan? I mean, how did that go?
We set up a historical cell. You see, Jagan, you later on got pretty involved with the history of the Air Force, but let me tell you what the historical cell at that time was. I remember walking into this office and there was this wing commander with nicotine-stained fingers who just smoked Will's Navy cut non-stop, and he had this shirt which first time I've seen an Air Force officer with his shirt sticking out. The poor guy, I mean, his whole office was nothing but cobwebs and a few files. I remember telling him, I said, okay, what do you have? And he says, yeah, one squad. I've heard of one squad. And he says, I got a file somewhere. And the bloody absolute dust and cobwebs he pull out. There's one thing with a single sheet of paper with a cyclist tag. 3 lines on what they had done in the Arakans and this, that, and the names of some of the pilots which spilled on the second side. That was the kind of information we had. So we missed a lot of issues actually when we were sitting there scripting. For example, Alfred Cook, I don't think, now I really kick myself, how the hell did we miss it? And boy, did we have the opportunity. We could have actually reenacted Cookie's fight here. But that time nobody knew a thing. And it was quite a job piecing it together. But it was great fun.
Now, what set the film apart from the previous documentaries that there's a lot of air-to-air, air-to-air shots. How did you sell that idea to the Air Force?
I don't think I had to sell it because it was always presumed that I was going to fly, and I wouldn't have done the film otherwise. I mean, it was very clear that this is what we wanted to do. We spent a lot of time on this. We had a 22-man crew. We shot for 66 days. We were all over the country. I mean, it was a problem actually having so many people. And in hindsight, I think we made a bit of a mistake. But you learn as you go along. By the time we shot Akashoda, 10 years later, a decade later, the crew was down to 4 or 5. So we had 20, but 16 mm was a different cup of tea. The biggest problem about aerial footage was that Natty was the ACS ops and Doru was additional ACS ops. And we had a wonderful guy called Leslie Springett. Okay. Springett was like all over the place, typical that Air Force, Anglo-Indian, full of life, always in trouble, always doing things, borrowing money from you to pay off Peter, paying off Paul, all that kind of stuff. And we were a very interesting team. I mean, everybody was working towards this. There was so much enthusiasm. And so Natty, MOD was our biggest problem. And MOD said, all right, you want this guy to fly. How is he going to fly? Because, so we got into Natty's staff car with the Air Force Janda on the bonnet and all that and drove down to Hindon, where the MiG-23 UB was parked. A couple of airmen were around it. I was supposed to demonstrate how I would get into the cockpit, strap up, and in the eventuality of an emergency, how the hell would I get out? And Natty had to sign saying that he was satisfied with the drill. So I got in and strapped up. And our biggest problem, Jagan, was twofold. One, 16mm cameras had a 400-foot magazine. So the moment you fitted that, you couldn't close the canopy. So the only way to fly was to take off that magazine. And the cameras were so designed that they could also take a 100-foot spool, which was an internal spool. Otherwise, those, that now 400 foot meant 10 minutes of film. Compared to today video, it's hard to even imagine. I mean, like you and me talking right now, this is like, the least thing we're worried about is stock is the footage. But a 100-foot spool, internal spool, meant 2.5 minutes of film. And again, because it was a 100-foot spool, it had pinholes on the beginning and pinholes at the back. So actually, I had 2 minutes of film. Now, the only way to get around this problem was to carry more cameras. That was one. Secondly, the battery packs were this big and bloody heavy. I mean, they were about 10 kilos. And we had to plug in the camera to that and then shoot with that. And they used to drain out pretty fast. So now the biggest. So there I was, and I was telling Natty, I said, sir, I will, the pilot will say, eject, eject, eject. I will pull the plug out like this, pull this handle here, and out I go, So Natty sort of man of very few words, typical Jaguar pilot, dark glasses, all that kind of stuff. So he gave a slight corner of his mouth smile and he signed that thing saying, I am satisfied. So when we were driving back from Hindon to Delhi, Natty was looking out of the window and he says, Kunal, you won't get out if something goes wrong with all that paraphernalia. So I said, so I mean, let's just hope and pray that it doesn't come to that, because if it does, then, we all know what's going to happen. There was no way one would have been able to get out. We actually just crammed the cockpit with, we use AST cameras, we use all kinds of stuff. And eventually I flew with 6 cameras there. And man, was it something else. I mean, we flew everything. Yeah. We flew Iskaras, Kirans, MiG-21s, all types, MiG-23s, with 27s. We flew with them. There was no trainer there, but then we always, then MiG-29s were fantastic. At times Sukhois hadn't come. We were still, and of course the Jaguars, Mirages. Dipti got to fly both the Jag and the Mirage. I don't remember how many. I've got a logbook, by the way, but I think I did over 150 fighter sorties alone for that.
In those 2 months. In those 2 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was crazy. In fact, there was another cameraman who was the nephew of a very famous Canberra pilot who was supposed to also do a lot of the aerial stuff. And I remember the first time he got airborne in a MiG-29 from Azampur. We all, in the evening, we landed and had a bath and landed up in the mess and we were having a drink. And there was this gentleman, my cameraman, who was talking about, we are going around in 4G and I got this shot and I got that. And there was no way of checking anything because 16mm meant we had to develop. I got to see the footage much later. And I was flying in the same formation, but I was having a lot of problems. Yeah, 2G, 3G, the damn camera is so heavy, it goes down into your lap, because under G-force. And there's the gentleman freaking out saying how with one finger he rotated the whole thing around and all that. So I looked at the pilot who was flying him, and that guy had that look on his face like, I need to talk to you alone kind of a thing. So this chap went to the loo or something. So this chap turns around to me and says, sir, this chap hasn't actually filmed anything. So I called him aside later in the evening and I said, if you're not comfortable with flying, then I'll take over the entire aerial photography. And he just looked at me and he says, yes, I think it's a damn good idea. So he didn't fly again. And then, of course, I got to do everything. He concentrated more on the ground sequences, and I got to then just fly. I mean, it was fantastic.
So I have one question. It's interesting you mentioned that you wouldn't really know the results straight away after the sortie. How long would it take? I mean, did you have to wait till the filming is over to take a look at the initial
Not only that,
rushes or
we
shots?
had to get the footage to Bombay. So, we had the Air Force. Nimi Suri was, man, that guy was something else. I mean, he was like, actually, the Air Force is like that, they're fantastic when it comes to crisis management. You tell them 1 month in advance, I want something, they can get, they tell them 5 minutes before and see how they start moving. Yeah? Suddenly, all the tropos and everything, it's like cut, cut, cut. And Natty, you just went, you could go into his office, the 20 points, and the meeting would last for 1.5 minutes. Yeah. I just said, I need to move MiG 21s from Hashimara to Kalakund. Done. Need to do this. Done. And one day I asked him, I said, sir, how, at least ask me something. He said, no, there's no requirement. Because if you're asking for it, you must have thought it out and you would have worked it. You won't ask for anything unless you need it. So there was that kind of trust. It was absolutely wonderful. So we had to get the footage to Bombay, where it was processed in ad labs. And to be very honest with you, I only actually got to see the footage after the 66 days shooting was over. The plan was every week or so we will go see the rushes, but once the shooting began, it was just chaos. Yeah. I mean, there was just so much happening that we just kept shooting. And the thing was, there was one particular sortie which I'm was very upset that we lost it because it was an assistant cameraman who had actually sacked. I'd sent him home. I was not finding his behavior to be correct. So out of sheer pick and spite, he opened up the can and exposed it. It was actually, we flew 5 hunters low level through the Sundarbans in an electric storm. And I can tell you that footage would have been something else. I mean, I remember shooting that. It was scary. I imagine we flew formation literally into the Iowa storm and then back to KKD. It was fantastic. But we, why were we filming that? I don't know. But since we were airborne, there was a storm. I said, let's try and film the storm. So yeah, it was just fantastic. Especially the hunters, yeah. Like there was a big difference in flying the hunters and the Canberras as against say the other jets because there it's like sitting on a balloon with shoom like that. It was all power. These aircraft still had that ability to fly without. Oh, it was fabulous.
So let's start looking at some of the clips, and then maybe we can start,
Sure.
talking about what we observed. So let me just share my screen.
Initial 302, 210 nautical miles. Initial at 30.
This must have been taken at Jangar.
Yes, it was.
Latest on track 150, 302, 187 nautical miles.
Track 150 hostile.
Scramble mission 823. Scramble, scramble, scramble. Mission 823 scramble. Initial vector 300. Short profile. Contact Sagar control. Channel Alpha standby 5.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch Mirage 2000s operating because 30 years later we are still watching them being at the forefront of battles.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
So this was probably the first shot where I thought, man, this is going to be different. Where you see an aerial shot of a Mirage 2000, I was like, all right, this documentary is not your usual documentary.
These are the tigers. Yeah. That white helmet is Dipti at the back. In that, there are three aircraft. You'll see it. This one. Yeah,
Oh,
that
yeah,
white
okay.
helmet. The first time they were flying a lady in a aircraft, and there was a lot of excitement around it. And I think Baseen was flying her. Choppy was also a part of that particular sortie. There was a lot of this thing going on between the Battle Axis 7 Squadron and 1 Squadron because 1 Squadron had their Golden Jubilee coming up and they were more interested in getting their film done than the rest of it. And all these kind of things used to go on all the time. The opening sequence was Arjungarh, and these are the pre-supercomputer days, where everything was with chalks, and it was very fascinating to watch all that. And yeah, well, it was fun. And then, of course, we've got the initial scramble sequence at Gwalior, with both that time 7 Squadron and 1 Squadron were the two majors, were the two Mirage 2000 squadrons. Seven were more the interceptor role and stuff like that, and one was more designed. At that time, the duties were divided that way, and they were the ground attack guys. So there was a lot of back and forth, and everybody wanted that one shot, which was like go under that damn bridge at Chambal River. So anyway, we had a lot of fun doing all that stuff, but it was. And as I said, the first time Dipti flew in a Mirage that day, and it was quite an occasion. Later, of course, she did that one very famous Jaguar sortie where we went with 12 aircraft from Ambala to Null, but that features later in the film. We'll talk about it then.
All right, so let's move on to the next clip.
Before we get into it, let me describe it since it's a very longish kind of a shot. It's a MiG-25 taking off, and I still remember first time I breached the subject with Natty, right? We were sitting in his office, and I said, sir, what about the MiG-20? What about the Foxbats? And he looked at me and he says, who told you we've got them? So I said, I looked it up in Jane's or something like that, and we all had a little chat. It was so secretive that we didn't even want to talk about it at that time.
I mean,
But then,
you must have made this film in what, in 1991?
No, I shot it in 1992. We finally screened it in, I think, 8th October. We missed the 8th October deadline. It was finally screened, I think, on 21st of March or 21st of March 1993. That's the day when on Doordarshan it ran between the English and the Hindi news. And there too lies the story. Because the film was slightly more than an hour, about 15 seconds more or something. And the INB minister was KP Singh Dio. And the DG Doordarshan was a chap called Krishnan. And firstly, they were saying, we'll give you the 11 o'clock slot. And I said, I'm not giving you my film. You either give me the slot between English and Hindi. And they said, what are you asking for? It's not possible. It's our prime time. This, that. I said, you want this film? You run it you give me the slot. So then finally, the minister said, it has to be done. So that was decided. Then they said, now you cut 15 seconds. And I said, I'm not going to do it. I am pretty stubborn, like all filmmakers can be. You're absolutely in love with every frame. I said, okay, what do you want me to cut? 15 seconds, I'm not going to cut it. So for the first time in India's history, where Doordarshan's history, whenever the television came into it, that the English news was delayed by 15 seconds. And the whole country used to be, if you remember, used to be on that tuk, 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 and bang, just. So, these were little things. And then everybody got into the spirit of it. I mean, it was wonderful. It was just superb. And then, of course, this particular shot that we've taken of a MiG-25 taking off was with a very powerful lens. In fact, I paid a lot of money for this one lens, and we didn't know how to use this lens because it was, I think, a 3000 mm lens or something like that. Very difficult to handle for the simple reason that once you got it fitted onto the camera, you couldn't find your subject here. Because so what we even thought of improvising a gun sight kind of a thing on the side so that we knew what we are looking at. Through a 3000 millimeter lens, supposing I focus it on a group of chaps, I mean, I'll get the I get maybe just the eyes and the nose of one chap, so you don't know where exactly what. So that lens was carried around in a huge box. It wasn't. And I think the only shot we took was of the MiG-25s taking off and landing. Otherwise, we never used that lens. This was taken by Alok Upadhyay when he was filming this. It's a very good shot. And then the wheels cutting in and.
Let's watch that one.
Yeah. You can see how the mirage-like effect. That is mainly because of the rainbows. The runway is like almost why birds sing. 8 or 9 kilometers away when we pick up this aircraft. So it's you can imagine the power of this lens, and that is what is causing that shimmering effect also on the screen. Oh, by the way, Kunal Varma and Dipti Bhalla film, I'll come back to this after we've taken this shot. I got sorted out by JRD Tata on this.
A couple of thoughts about that particular clip. I mean, the MiG-25 was not a secret in the Indian Air Force. I mean, we knew it was there. It was being operated. We had a very very brief public glimpse, and there during the, I think it was 89 Tilpat air power display, where the IAF flew a composite formation of 10 aircraft, and it's like very so far away you could barely make out its shape. So with that background, what we saw in that shot was probably the first time that we've seen the MiG-25 in film. I mean, let me put it this way. And honestly speaking, I don't remember seeing too much footage of the MiG-25 even after that. Man, not during Kargil, even during the retirement ceremony, I haven't seen too much film about it being flown around. So it was a bit of a surprise shot, and no wonder that you sort of picked it as your title clip.
I don't think there was a choice here. It was just such a beautiful shot. And at the end of the film, when if you saw the title, it said Kunal Varma Dipti Bhalla film. And JRD sort of saw the film. The only comment he made was, "How is it that your name comes first?" I thought, a gentleman always has a lady first. I got the message after that. I think we made 50 films. It was always Dipti's name first and mine. I mean, he had this absolutely wonderful way of, putting you in your place. He's just saying things in such a delightful manner. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. But the Foxbat was also, I remember being very taken aback at the sheer size of the aircraft when I first saw it. It was almost as big as the AN-32. And this particular shot, I think Johnson Chaco was flying it, or either Gary Grewal, who was commanding the squadron. I think it's Chaco. Chaco was the pilot when we took this shot. Later, Chaco was the battalion commander in NDA when I shot standard bearers. And I remember one shot we did take, because we worked a lot around it, was where we wanted him to come out of the sun. And for that, he had to fly across the runway like that, And I think we tried 2 or 3 takes and it didn't work. By the time the 4th take, the rising sun had risen and gone to another level altogether. So you got to be pretty quick. But even to strap up for it used to take ages. In fact, that's one sequence we never used. I remember the pilots, when they would actually get into those G suits and those green colored things, they would take close to 3 hours there. And then they couldn't walk because, they literally had to, like Bugs Bunny, sort of go to the aircraft. And I remember Chaco in that suit, and Dippy made him do half a dozen takes. And the guy was like saying, "Listen, ma'am, you're going to kill me." But you can't even stand up straight. It was quite a. I remember Chaco joking about that pretty often. I wasn't there, so I told him, "Don't blame me for having taken those reshots." The ground shooting, 90% of it was handled by Dipti. I was more focused on the flying and the overall planning of the the sequences and stuff like that. That's Vinko Rakesh Sharma. Whose idea it was, I don't know, but I don't think there was a choice. He was just he's such a wonderful human being, and so much the face of the Air Force, till when he did his famous sortie in 1983 when he went to space. And um, uh, I think who suggested it, I don't remember. Maybe it was Dipti's idea. I don't. Or maybe it was mine. It's a long time ago now. Jagan, it was 28 years ago. But the moment we approached him, he was like, he's just too good. Yeah. We have remained very, very good friends even ever since. And he also wrote the foreword for my first book, which was Ocean to Sky. So, I have quite an association with him. This is an ASD camera. The particular lens which we are using here, that you can make out. This is that famous null sortie. This was in Tezpur.
MiG-21.
Moftu, yeah, MiG-21.
The old Type 77s, FLs.
Yeah, they were actually my aircraft of choice for filming. Every time they asked me which aircraft do you want, I'd say I'd go up in a MiG-21. Yeah, it was a MiG-29s.
27s.
Yep. They're loading an RPG here. These are the missiles being brought for the Mirages on those trolleys. Another incredible aircraft, the MiG-29. It's just a real beauty. This was in Jodhpur. This was over Siachen. And I remember this sortie very clearly. It was very, very cloudy and we just couldn't see a thing. So we had this whole bank of clouds below us. This is Jodhpur, 10 Squadron.
Yes. So where were they? Where that an armament range? Where were they doing all the firing?
Generally at firing ranges. I mean, we always had to clear them and stuff like that. This was 6th Squadron, the maritime lot in Pune. The Tiny and myself. Then of course, we are now moving on to transport aircraft here. There is an IL-76 landing in Leh. Goel was flying that, Air Commodore Goel. He was the head of that transport wing in another aircraft which was incredible to shoot from because of that nose being kind of glass. You know, you could just lie on your belly and shoot downwards.
Hmm.
This is Chushul. This is Chushul airfield actually. These Kiang running across. And then of course we move on to Siachen.
This is AN-32, right?
Yeah. A back hatch open. This was another experience. I did a lot of this eventually. I mean, I just keep hanging around and shooting from the back of these aircraft. And it's great fun, yeah. There's nothing between you and Mother Earth, and you like your legs dangling down. These troops are from 17 Rajput, and this is a post called Zulu.
And these are all the 114 HU Siachen pioneers.
Yes, that's right. Incredible bunch of guys. They're landing on these tabletops. They were the lifeline. Now, of course, they continue to be the lifeline, but you got a lot more helicopters and stuff like that. You know, ALHs, this, that. So the things have changed, but in a sense, they remain the same. I mean, you know, there's not that much difference in what's happening. But what flying here? What skill? Beautiful. This was quite an experience, shooting in Zulu. Again, this is the first and only time a woman went up to a post because Dipti was the only one who's ever been to a forward post in Siachen. I don't think there was some sort of they decided against it after that for whatever reasons.
Mm-hmm.
She had quite a ball. It was, and not only her, we had 4 girls in the. This is a Lohit Valley in Assam. We had 4 girls in the unit. They were all assistant directors who were helping out with the with various. Everybody had clearly identified tasks. There was a hell of a lot of work which went into it. You know, getting the wings right, getting the medals right, getting the amount of research, and then going around looking for tailors to do it. Yeah. Somebody even suggested, why don't you paint those medals? I said, no, I want them done, and I want them done in exactly the same cloth which they've used. You know. This is Galing, which is where the Brahmaputra comes in into India, just north of Tooting.
Mm-hmm.
North of Tooting. Of course, we did a lot of work here later. This is the Vijayanagar, your extreme airfield that now I think they've now hard topped it. And this is your featherweights, and this was of course the Air Force Day Parade, which was commanded by Nanda Karyappa on 8th October 1992. This was a hell of a day. I remember these few days. I don't think I've traveled as much as I have in my life. Yeah. It started on 5th October until the evening of 8th October. I think I've probably covered the zigzag through the whole country. These all these cotton colors being carried.
So I'll stop here.
Now where these guys go to. This was shot on a Indian naval ship. And,
No, before we start, let's sort of sum up. So, going by the opening shots of all the aerial shots, all the different locations, you went to all four corners of the country.
oh, you can say that
I
again.
mean, who who decided where you are going to go? I mean, who decided the itinerary? Like, did you have an idea, or did Airhead headquarters come up with that plan? How did the entire
Basically,
plan come through?
I sat with Springett and let's do this here, let's do that there. Um, then of course the transport guys would have their own. We had a lot of coordination required as to what is required because which aircraft, how much, you try to get. Supposing there's no point being in Kannur then coming back to being in Salur in Coimbatore and then coming back to Chandigarh and then going back to Bangalore. So we naturally all that was done. Even then, 66 days at a trot. The biggest problem, Jagan, actually was that we had, as I mentioned earlier, we had actually a 17 or 18 man crew. We had 4 chaps from AST, and that made a total of 22. And the problem, as the guy who was controlling the shoot, and for both Dipti and me, was that how do you occupy? You see, everybody has a limited role. I mean, if he's a light guy or if he's only handling the 3,000 millimeter lens, now. And Air Force accommodation and all was a big problem because most of my crew was staying in SNC or messes. Now we would land in a particular place. They would, and early morning we got to take off again. So they would be given their dinner. They would put up in reasonable accommodation. But everybody wanted to go see a movie, stretch out, do whatever. And boredom became a bit of a problem. And managing this whole crew, that's why when I did shoot Akash was a decade later, I trimmed it down, I think, to 6 people by that time. It was a completely different ball game. But then technology had changed. Video made life a lot easier. So those were the issues. Now, if you remember the opening shots of the Jaguars, some of the camera shots are like, they've got a kind of a dome like that. Those have been taken on ASTE cameras, which are basically for, as I mentioned to you earlier, we had to use these cameras also to be able to expand on our filming time in the air. With a normal camera, I had 2 minutes of film. After that, what do I do? So even then, even with these additional cameras, I would have about, say, at the most 10 minutes. So I would shoot for 10 minutes and then after that, take over controls and do loops and all kinds of stuff. So all these guys watching from the ground, all aircraft would be flying around in perfect order. And then, after the shooting, one aircraft would go haywire and start doing all kinds of crazy things. And everybody say, there goes Kunal, having a ball. It was great fun. One of the things that we had to take a decision on. Do we use actors as Air Force officers? Or do we use Air Force officers to enact scenes? Okay, now this was a very, very serious debate because in my mind, I was crystal clear. I said it's going to be Air Force guys going to do the role. Actors might give you that little bit of smoothness in the scenes and stuff like that. But Air Force chaps have their own way of speaking, which no actor on earth can actually capture. Let's be very frank about it. If you remember the Longewala scene later in the film where Tully, which is actually Bebur, he just says, 4 hunters, 2 front guns or whatever, let's go and get them. I mean, you can do as many takes as you want. That nonchalance with which it is said, it cannot be done. But on the other hand, Air Force actors, Air Force officers acting in a film also get a little stiff. So we had a few issues there, but in fact, I like that I don't want it to be a very smooth, Tom Hanks kind of a thing, or Tom Cruise kind of a thing, because it takes away from a documentary. And this is a documentary, a drama in the sense, and the kind of resources. The next scene, which is on a ship, we got the guys, we got NDA cadets who disappeared after that. We had to search for them. It was crazy, but. Yeah, it was the Salt of the Earth was an experience. Yeah, the shooting of the film in itself was something else.
There's the real historical stuff starts at this point, which is let me just play that one out.
Sure.
Share and play.
This was INS Magar, which was a uh, the main supply ship, which handles all your LSTs and stuff like that. So and these guys are all they're all NDA cadets who were flown out from NDA, six of them. And like good NDA cadets, they promptly disappeared after the shoot. Nobody was going to meet this squadron mate and that squadron mate. And they're real badmashes there. But a wonderful bunch.
So, how did you? So, where did the scene come from? Because I don't remember reading about it anywhere. Or is it something you made up?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a license you give yourself. You know, how would youngsters react on a ship, kind of a thing. So, okay, it was just to get the ball rolling. Then, of course, these shots are actually taken in NDA, the riding and stuff like that.
Yeah. Let me stop you there. You know, one of the funny thing is when you show the roundel, you show the RAF roundel there. You know, blue and red.
Yeah, because we are talking about Cranwell. Because all this Cranwell was the Air Force thing for them, no? The training academy for them. So these scenes are depicting Cranwell actually, though, and then these are the initial.
Where did you get all the equipment these guys are wearing? You know, the leather helmet, goggles, parachute.
I know that. Yeah, I don't remember the exact places where they were got, but I know that there was a hell of a lot of work that went into it. We had to. I think the Air Force had them. Maybe the museums had it or something. I don't know. Getting this footage also was quite a job. This has a story behind it, which is quite remarkable. But
let's watch the footage. Then I'll stop. Then we. This was in the Air Force.
This chap is the owner of Marta's, who is a very famous film studio. He had that camera, and then we took that shot from inside the thing where it always used to look ulta. And we converted it. This is actual shots of the Northwest Frontier Province, Miran Shah, and all that.
So, where did the footage come from?
It's a hell of a story, and it's you see the biggest problem was when JRD had given us the money for the film. He had laid down one condition. He had told me at that time. He said, "Kunal, if you want more money, tell me now. Don't come back to me later and say I need another 4 lakhs, 5 lakhs, 6 lakhs because I'm not going to give it to you. But if you want it now, you tell me now." So I had said at that time, I said, "No, sir, I don't need it." I mean, I had done my calculations and budgeting and all that. I said, "No, sir, I'm okay." What I hadn't catered for was stock footage. And then we didn't know what to do because we got some from films division and all that, where we had to pay quite a lot. But they didn't have enough material. So what do? So we wrote to IAF has the RAF have a Air Force station called Hendon. So we wrote to them where they stored their archival material. And I sent an email from Nimi Suri's office, Chief of Air Staff India, all that kind of shit, saying that what do you guys have? And the Brits, you got to give it to them. I mean, those guys, they sent us a 180-page fax back, which is a complete list of everything. In fact, the chief's office was getting upset with me. He says, "Ink khatam ho jayega, who's going to pay for this?" I said, "Yeah, let it run." I mean, everything was there. This, and Brits are great dukandars. Yeah, they had viewing charges. Okay, forget about buying the footage. Viewing charges, so many pounds per minute. This, that, etc., etc. And it went back right from the beginning of the origin of film, yeah, and it was like crazy. And suddenly you're looking at everything. Now, even viewing charges itself meant about 7 or 8 lakhs if we just wanted. I firstly get to London and I will look at all that. It was a big problem. So that evening, I had gone for a drink to the Dholakwa club with my classmate who's from the Doon School, Sanjeev Singhal, who was from the Air Force. He was a I think he was the wing commander or squadron leader at that time. And I spent the whole evening griping about this. You know, what the bloody hell, yeah. The footage is there and we don't have the money, and the JRD is, given us this condition and I can't even ask for the cash. So what do I do? Now at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, we get a phone call from, I thought it was Sanjeev Singhal pulling my leg. It was a very funny kind of a Cockney accent saying, "Can I speak to Kunal Varma?" And I said, like, "Who is this?" And he said, "Look, I believe you've written to RAF Hendon asking for footage." And he said, "Why are you asking them? Why are you asking the moving poms for it?" That's the word he used. So I said, "What do you mean poms?" So he says, "I'm Welsh," or something. It was.
Mm.
He was also part of the War Graves Commission, who had visited India recently, and he said, "A lot of this footage is with you guys." And I said, "Really? Where?" And he said, "H Block Hartmans, room number this, because the previous year he had come with the War Graves Commission. And he said there's a joint secretary sitting in that office, 248B or something like that. He gave us the number. And he said he has made a settee, sitting thing with a cloth on it and all that. He said there are 3 boxes. You see, what had happened was a lot of the film was 35 in the early days. 16 wasn't there. It was either 8 or 35 And this was all nitric based footage. So it had to be stored in special vaults in Shimla and stuff like that. Then came celluloid, 16 So a lot of it had to be converted. So these chaps had converted this footage. They put a JCO in charge of this. Jagan, they even have the original thing about going to the UN on J&K on this. And the JCO was told कि 10 roll में से आप एक रखो, 9 जला दो. And they burnt it. And there's a whole bloody catalog. Okay, anyway, that's a separate issue that we didn't know at that time. So this call comes. I call up Nimi Suri at 4 o'clock in the morning. You don't wake up the air chief at 4 in the morning unless you have Chinese at Galwan Valley or something like that. And he was like livid. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "Sir, this is what I've been told." So he said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" I said, "Just do one thing. I know Ministry of Defense. If we put in a formal request, they'll realize what they've got. They won't give it to us. So just with your star plates on, just come there in the morning." So I drove in my gypsy. The chief arrives in his gypsy, and all the DSC guard with their neem ka datun and all that. Suddenly they didn't know whether to brush their teeth or salute the chief. And with Nimi Suri was very good at bluster also. Oh, kholo, and all that. So we just went in, break open the damn office, and there were these 3 settees. And he said, "Phado isko." Ripped open the bloody cloth blocks with that seal, with that charane, that 20 charane ka thing, that lion on it, hadn't been opened. And mind you, we're taking a hell of a risk because supposing it turns out to be something else, we guys would have been in real hot water. So we broke it. We made the DSC guard open it. Todo isko. And साहब ये टूट जाएगा तो इधर हम carpenter भेज देगा, हम Air Force का chief है and all this. खोला उसको. And Jagan, there was these yellow, black and red of Kodak. Yeah. My hands were shaking. I was like this, and I just sort of, there was dust on those plastic covers. Did this. We got an AN-32. We loaded this footage on, and we flew to Tamram the same day. And we went straight to Prasad's, who had the telecine facility. Now, we didn't know what this footage was, okay, mind you. RIN, all the landings, RIAF, you name it, but silent footage. None of it had soundtracks. So, but again, Prasad's, something like 4,000 rupees for every shot, to just telecine it. It's the reverse process of filming it, of doing it. A lot of stuff I left to if I had unlimited resources, I had taken the whole bloody thing. So I just said, I would say, okay, hang on. That looks like a World Wellness. Give me that, or those are type bombers. Give me this, or, whatever. We even got Arjun Singh playing Tenikoy and all that kind of stuff. So whatever we could, we grabbed. And then we put it back in this AN-32 and we flew back and we returned everything. And in the meantime, that settled. The Joint Secretary was very upset. The office has been ransacked and all that. Later, when I did the history of the Navy, I wanted the naval shots, and this time the chief writes to the MOD, and MOD says it's classified, we can't give it to you. So we had that's the way things work. I don't know where all that footage is now. I think it went to the Sena Chitra Prabhat.